I wanted to talk to you today about projectors, and specifically ultra short throw projectors. Now, I know you're used to me talking to you about audio, but I should mention that I've been involved with the cinema industry since I was 14 years old, which is a long time ago. I started as a humble projectionist and ended up as senior engineer for AMC/UCI in the UK. So I am quite familiar with how pictures should look and the sound that the amplifiers should make. Apologise for the noise, by the way, because it's absolutely tipping down at the moment. Outside, luckily, not inside. Now, the point about projectors, and when I say projectors, I'm talking now about the new brand of, or the new type of short or ultra short throw projectors that sit just in front of the screen. For example, this is my television, which is an 85-inch or 86-inch LG. So imagine that's my screen. The projector will actually sit here, somewhere between 6 and 12 inches away from the screen, hence ultra short throw. The advantages of that are, of course, you don't have to have holes in the ceiling, you don't have to drape wires all around the house, and that's the main things in its favour, and the fact that you can largely get it running within a couple of hours. I know the manufacturers of such projectors would have you say you just sling it on there and plug it in and life's wonderful. Well, you will get a picture of sorts, but the geometry would be wrong, and it does take, shall we say, someone that's never done it, probably take you an hour or so to get it pretty well right, and then you may have to change the way it's mounted. Anyway, let's assume that it's certainly going to be a million times quicker than getting brackets and screwing into the ceiling and getting power cables and HDMI cables around. So that's really for the enthusiast. The person I'm talking to here is primarily ordinary people. Now, I don't mean that to sound patronizing or anything like that. I'm not talking to experts, because they won't want to hear what I'm going to say, because hopefully they know it already. But this is just for people like you that want a big picture. Now, I would say that if you're going to want bigger than 85-inch or so, a projector is probably the only way to go. But up to that sort of size, a television set is by far the best way to go. But if you want that cinema experience, why not go to the cinema? No, okay, sorry. Of course, you don't want to go to the cinema with all those people eating popcorns and playing on their telephones. You don't want that. Nor do I. If you get roughly what you pay for up to about an 85, 86 inch. And by far the best televisions, in my opinion, are OLED, but they're generally limited at this present time to about 75 inch and can be quite expensive. But they do produce blacks. Now we're going to go on to blacks a bit later on, because that's partly what this video is about. Let's assume that you want more than 85 inch, so you're going to go and buy a projector. Now we'll exclude the ones that mount on the ceiling, because I'm suggesting that they are more for the enthusiast rather than the average person. There are a couple of things you need to be aware of. First of all, in spite of the hype, projectors don't work well in a lit room. In fact, one of the things that sells projectors is contrast ratio, and you see phenomenal numbers, 2,500, 3,000 to 1 ratio, and I would suggest that these are a bit like Chinese watts. You can never find out quite how they arrive at those figures. Well, let's assume you've chosen or you've been looking at a projector and it quotes 2,500 to 1 as the contrast ratio. Now, if that's true, that's fairly good. But what you will find is the moment you have any light in that room, that contrast ratio will go through the floor, and you'll be lucky if you get 200 to 1. Because unlike a television set that produces light in one way or another, a projector reflects light. Now, that may be obvious, but the screen doesn't know, by and large, I'll come on to that point in a minute, whether the light that it's reflecting comes from your projector or comes from outside, the light in the ceiling or your table lamp, or just ambient light. Now, you will only get a really good, satisfying picture in blackout. If your home is not able to be blacked out, and I mean dark, can't see your hand in front of your face, or, well, that's a bit silly perhaps, but if you get what I'm meaning. One of the things these projectors boast about is the fact that you can watch it with the curtains open, the sun shining and things like that. Now, whilst that is, it's a bit of a poetic license to say that's true, but it is sort of true. You will be able to see it, and you can liken it in the same way to watching a standard television. I don't know about you, but if we watch the television in the day, we tend to pull the curtains, and certainly if the sun's shining in, you know, it just wipes out the picture. But generally with a television set, you can watch it under most light conditions. It will always look better in the dark, of course, but a projector will look crap with light. It really will. And I don't care what the person in the shop tells you, bearing in mind they're salesmen. I'm not trying to sell you one. I don't care whether you buy one or not. I'm just telling you from a background of cinema and my own experience, and I'm not trying to sell you anything. This is the case. So if your room cannot be blacked out, forget it. Just forget it, because you're wasting your money. And you will remember these words if you go and buy one. You'll think, Mike did say this would happen. And as some of these projectors are expensive, I was looking at what prompted me to make this video. I actually went to a local shop here in New Zealand, one of the few places where you can actually get a demonstration, and had a look at the latest Samsung, which in New Zealand retails for about $11,000. I don't know what that is in your currency, but in New Zealand dollars, that's a lot of money for a poor pensioner. But I went there with my plastic and I was prepared to buy one. Now, I obviously haven't bought one, so you can tell that I wasn't grossly impressed. Now, there's two things that a projector tends, and I use the word tends because there are hundreds out there. The cheaper ones are really rubbish. I mean, they're not very bright and they suffer from all sorts of problems. Now, to me, there are two really important things. Let's assume you're going to go for the more high end of the market, because if you're going to go for a lower end, you're going to have lots of things that aren't going to be that good. And if all you want is a big picture to show your kids cartoons or watch football or some other such thing, then maybe it's not so critical and you can get away with some of these problems I'm going to describe. But if you're a film person and you've got hundreds of DVDs, Blu-rays and even 4Ks if you're lucky, then you are going to find this a problem. Now, the biggest problem in most projectors, now bear in mind this Samsung that I'm telling you about is the latest type, 3 lasers, so no silly color wheels, no LCDs. This is the one. It still cannot produce black. Now, most televisions can't produce black, and they get round it by having local dimming, so basically turning the lights out and to make the picture look black. The exception to this, of course, is OLED, where they can produce black, and it's a simple matter that the thing that produces the light is turned off, so no light, black. But with an LCD, which is what most TVs and a lot of projectors are, a light is on all the time behind the LCD, and the LCD, when a voltage is applied to it, shuts down, but it never shuts down 100% of the light. That's why you probably heard people talk about the blacks aren't black, they're grey. And the same can be said for this projector. Something that shows it up dramatically is, imagine you're viewing a film that was shot for cinema in 2:3:5:1. In other words, it will have black bars on the top and on the bottom, and the picture will be that ratio. The bars at the bottom and the top should not be visible. They should just be black. This is assuming you're viewing it in a blacked out room, because if you're not, it won't be black whatever projector you have. If you spend $1 million on one, it won't. If you can see that there's a dark grey panel on there, that projector will not produce satisfying blacks. And the example I would use in filming the night sky. Now, I know the parts of the sky which have a degree of colour, when you can see other galaxies and things like that. So it's not black, but you know what I mean. But if you're living out in the country, the sky is as black as you want it to be, with white dots in it. If you see something like that with a poor contrast ratio, that sky will be grey, and you know it isn't really grey, it just looks like that, and that's the spoil. Now, okay, well, let's put that to one side. Okay, let's say you can accept that, you can squint and only watch half the picture. The other major issue, which you probably don't know, but I will tell you about it. Films made for the cinema are photographed at 24 frames per second. Now, when they're shown in the cinema, each frame is exposed twice to give you an apparent 48 frames per second. And that's basically the same frame is exposed twice like that. And that gives you the illusion that there are more frames than there are, and so it doesn't flicker so much. So if you're going to show a film on your new projector, or television for that matter, it must have a mode on it that says it's suitable or it will work at 24 frames per second. Never mind about all this crap about 200 frames and stuff like that. It's bullshit. 24 frames is the frequency that you want that projector to work on to get a proper cinematic image, exactly the same as you'd see it in a decent cinema. If it doesn't give you true 24 frames per second, you will regret it, and I would suggest you must not buy it. I don't know why some of them don't have it, when some of them do, whether they think most people are going to be watching Netflix or even YouTube for that matter. This is how I would describe it. If I have an object and I run it across the screen slowly, you can see, well, hopefully, it travels slowly and it's clear. If it's not 24 frames per second, it will look like this, exaggerated. It will jerk, and it looks worse in live sport when there's movement of a camera all the time, but that's not usually an issue, live sport, because that's not shot at 24 frames. It's shot at whatever the video of that country is, and that could be 50 or 60 frames or multiples of that. But I'm talking about you guys that are into films and you want the nearest thing without the popcorn and the telephones going off and people chatting and kicking your seat, you know, all the good stuff. If you want to look at it the way it should be, or the way it was photographed for that matter, it must have 24 frames per second. And I'm sure you've seen this even on your own TV, because some of the older ones don't have 24 frames. And when you watch a film, stuff goes like that. It doesn't travel smoothly across the screen. And that's the reason. Simple as that. So when I went to look at this Samsung, 11 grand, it does not support 24 frames per second, and it does not make black pictures. That's why I'm here talking about it now, and why I haven't got one of those to show you, because the video today was going to be me showing you this projector. But instead, I don't want to talk you out of buying one, but you must go and look at one in the shop. If you can find a shop in your country, good luck to that. But be aware, even if you can't see one, at least check the 24 frames, because that will destroy it. And now I've told you that, you're going to curse at me, because every time you look at the screen now and what you've got, well, unless you're lucky enough to already have a 24 frames, in which case you know what I'm talking about. Right, I'm going to get the drawing board out now and show you a problem, another problem. Now, I'm going to talk about screens. Now, as I've said before, you must have a dark room. I don't care what people say, they're out to flog you, these projectors. But if you haven't got a blacked out room, you're wasting your money. Okay? So let's say you've got one and you've got your black curtains, your wife's been on the sewing machine and she's made some curtains for you. So how do you project this? Now, you can project it on a wall, but as you'll see in the drawings I'm going to show you, really crap drawings, see, I've done them already, but it illustrates the point. To sum it up, the wall must be completely flat. If it's one that sort of wobbles around a bit, and it needs to be painted matte white. So it's the whitest white you can find, matte. If there's any sheen to it, it's going to look terrible, and you'll see white marks where the light's shining on it. So it must be matte white, and if the surface is flat, as in probably a more modern house, I would suggest you go over it with sandpaper, the finest grit that you can find, and make sure it's smooth, and then probably put 2 to 3 or maybe more coats, depending on what the finish is. Obviously, if you've got a green wall at the moment, you're probably going to take 5,000 gallons of paint to make that white. And that will do. But if you've got any kind of light, in the room, it will show it. Ideally, you need a screen that is designed for these projectors, because as the light comes up, here's the screen, and hits the screen, it actually works better. It's designed to accept light and then reflect it out to you. So if there's a light coming from above, it attenuates the light, and it really does. I mean, it works. So that would be the better kind of screen, but they're expensive. I know you get what you pay for, but if you've got any kind of light coming in and you want to watch the projector in the day, let's say for something uncritical like the news or who's killing who and stuff like that, this kind of screen will be better, and you will be able to accept a moderate degree of light coming in. But if there's any direct light, sunlight, forget it. You can have the $1 million screen and it still won't be able to show you the picture. So cheapest option, paint, but it must be, or the alternative, if you haven't got a flat wall, a matte white screen that you can purchase and just hang on the wall. But that, again, will work exactly the same as paint. Might be a slightly better finish, but overall, you'd be surprised how good a wall can be if it's matte white, but it will reflect light from any source at all, even the bloke down the road. And this is your house, okay? This is where you've chosen to put your screen. Here is your bench, and the screen is mounted to the wall in some way. If your screen is basically your wall and it needs to be painted, and it needs to be painted in probably 3 or 4 coats of pure white matte paint, that will do. But here is your projector. I hope it looks better than the one I've drawn. Now, if you look at the wall, unless you're very lucky, it will be more like that, severely exaggerated. Now, here's a bump on the wall. Well, let's not look at a bump. Let's look at this crevice here. Your projector is producing a beam like this. When the beam of light, as it's projected from the ground, hits that piece there, you are over here, you will see quite a dark shadow beneath it. And where there's a peak, you will see it will be obvious. Now, in the old days, when your projector was back here and you went like this for your picture, those lumps and bumps on the wall, you wouldn't have noticed that. But because you're projecting from such a low angle, you will really notice that. So unless you need to sand the wall down with a very fine grit paper, 2 or 3 coats of really matte white. You don't want it to have any tints on it, otherwise there's no point in having trying to calibrate the. Well, I think that's the end of my comment on here. I'm sorry it's only been me waffling and a bit of really bad drawing, but as I say, I was going to show you the projector that I bought, but it looks like it's going to have to be the LG TV for a few years yet. Whether I'll ever buy a projector, I don't know. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.